Hi, Vanessa.
Hi.
Hello, Professor Bonds. Um, you are an experimental social psychologist, did I say that right? At Cornell University. And you just came out with a book. I think it's this month, right? You have
Last
more.
week.
Last week? Holy
Yeah.
smokes. Congratulations.
Thank
You
you.
have more influence than you think. And if you could just briefly really introduce yourself and why you're interested in influence.
Sure. So, again, I'm an experimental social psychologist. So I basically do studies on people where I don't just look at, what it takes to influence people, which a lot of people do in this sort of who study social influence. I look at our intuitions about it and what we think is going to work and what actually works. And what I find is that we tend to underestimate the influence that we have over other people. And we tend to really be a little too hard on ourselves, basically, and underestimate ourselves in general.
Is this only in social settings, or are there sort of settings that people typically overestimate their abilities? Is that
Yeah.
a good question?
No, that's a great question. And there's actually a long history of research showing that we overestimate like how smart we are and how moral we are, and even things like being a better driver than we actually are. Like we all think we're above average drivers, even
Not
though that's
possible.
impossible. But it seems like in these specifically social interpersonal settings, all of a sudden that overconfidence goes away and we get this other bias where we underestimate. We think we're less than average on, how many friends we have and, how much people are paying attention to us and listening to us and things like that.
So we totally should have talked about this on the live, but can you talk a little bit about how we all think we're, or maybe this is just me, that I think I like have no friends and I'm a super loner and like everybody else has more friends than me, and why don't people like me?
That's really funny. Yeah, so there's research by a graduate student here at Cornell, Sebastian Derry, and some other co-authors, where he basically asked people, compared to other people, do you think you have more or less friends? Do you think that you are further or closer to the middle of your social network, like a really central figure of your network? Do you think you go out more than or less than other people? And what he finds is that, and it's funny that actually that you would worry about this, because what he finds is that what people do is they imagine like these influencers, like people who have lots of friends and go out and are like posting on Instagram all the things they're doing, and that when we think to ourselves, like, how many friends do I have? How much do I go out? We imagine, like, we think of like scrolling through Instagram, for example, seeing all the fun things other people are doing when we're at home, alone. And so by contrast, we think that we're less than, when in fact, so many more people are scrolling home alone, just like us, but we don't see that on Instagram, for example.
No, I think it's a really nice reminder to reframe that, because I definitely spend a lot of time on my couch looking at other people living their lives, thinking like, oh, if I could only rally to leave my house. And then I don't. And then the day fades. But Vanessa, will you tell us your secret?
Sure. So my secret is that, for all like I am an Ivy League professor who went to Ivy League schools. I have always felt like an imposter. And I grew up on a farm in New Jersey, which you were surprised to hear has farms. But actually, New Jersey, it was a bird farm. So we had like pheasants and peacocks and quail, all sorts of weird birds running around.
Okay, that's fascinating. But keep going with your secret, and then I'll try to not ask you about the birds.
Yeah. So, I grew up on a farm, like it's sort of a farm girl in this rural community in New Jersey, which does have rural communities. My dad was a mechanic, never went to college. And then I went to Brown for undergrad, this Ivy League school. And I constantly was so insecure about how I came across to other people, about other people like thinking that I didn't belong, feeling like I didn't belong, but also that everyone could see that like shouldn't be here. I wasn't sort of part of this. In fact, I studied abroad in Ireland, and I had to go to the registrar to like figure out my grades, like how to transfer. And they couldn't find my name when I first like walked into the registrar. And my first thought was, oh my God, I never got into Brown. This has all been a dream. I knew I didn't belong here.
Do you
And
think, oh, and then what happened? They found you?
they did, and then they found me. Yeah. Like 2 seconds later, but that was the moment. And so I think that's why I'm so drawn to this topic, and that I spend a fair amount of the book trying to reassure people that you are seen and that people like you more than you think, and that you are more convincing and persuasive than you think, because I spent so much of my life, doubting that.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I feel like that's a really relatable feeling, or at least it really resonates with me. I think also, thank you so much for compiling this data to sort of pat us on the back and have this sort of like tangible evidence that people do like us, and that, not to use your words, that we are seen and that we do have an impact on the world. And I feel like I really needed to hear that right now. So I really appreciate your work. And thank you so much, Vanessa, for coming on here. Again, the book is titled You Have More Influence Than You Think. It came out last week, and I'll definitely put a link in the email for everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Making time to do this with me. It really is an honor.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Take care.
Yeah.